Hey, everybody, welcome to the Open Network User Group podcast. I'm Mark Tierney. I'm ONUG's CTO. And today I'm back with the usual suspects from the Network Cloud Working Group. We're having a lot of fun and we're working on some really cool stuff. This is the team that put out the new Network Cloud playbook, The Journey to Agile Network Infrastructure. It's available at onug.net under the collaboration tab. Today, we're going to be talking about services, connections, and security for the network cloud. And this is going to get, I predict, a little crazy, but we're going to have some fun with it anyway. But first, ONUG Fall 2022. It's going to be a hybrid event. It's going to be in New York City, Center 415 on Fifth Avenue. It's in Manhattan, October 19th and 20th. Come join the ONUG community of Global 2000 companies, enterprise architects, cloud providers, thought leaders, as we explore the building blocks required to create flexible, transformative IT business platforms. Go to onug.net to register for this event today. All right, so let's say hi to everybody. I've got Mark Fishburne. He's the president of MarketWord. Zahir Aziz. He's a principal solutions architect at Cisco. William Collins, principal cloud architect at Alkira. Darren Miller, distinguished technical marketing engineer at Cisco Systems, and our fearless leader. That's right, he's the chairman of the chair of the Network Cloud Working Group at ONUG, Steve Wood. He's the principal engineer and enterprise architect at Cisco. Steve, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good. Looking forward to getting back to Manhattan. I can tell you, Secaucus is okay, but I'm just saying.
Right, New York City, yeah. So the conference is like right around the corner. It seems like we just had the spring conference, and but your team has been working hard. We continue to kind of evolve and iterate things around the great piece of work that you did in the network playbook. But it's never done. It's not like the network is static. It's not like requirements are static. And Mr. Fishburne is always he's always putting the screws to us, right, on in the security space, because that's certainly not static. So tell us what's going on lately on the team, and why you want to dig into this topic.
First of all, you're absolutely right. Nothing ever stops. You never get to do some work and then just kind of sit back and kind of watch your shot, right? Go out and it's just like you're doing it, you shoot, and you're going back for something else. That's exactly where we are here with the network cloud, right? There's a lot of stuff going on out there in terms of new service innovations, right? New security innovations, and a lot of different emerging connectivity patterns that we've been talking about during our time here at ONUG, and how we can help customers exploit those, how we can help them understand them, so they know coming from sort of the old way we were building legacy networks in the past into this new, more cloud-like paradigm of how we basically can use not just networking, but services attachment and infrastructure as a service, all kinds of different services that we can consume in a more managed way, a more so I call it just we're consuming services. We're not building network services anymore. We can actually consume them directly. So it takes a lot of a burden off the IT folks in terms of having to essentially build everything that they need to get the job done, right? Somebody's building those use cases for you. They could, potentially, deliver them to you in one shot. So those kinds of things are happening, and we want to kind of understand and make sense of it. Mark Fishburne, go ahead and get it kicked off. The rest of us, we can come.
Okay, all right. Well, I think it's probably best to look at this diagram we have of the network cloud, because it's kind of here to stay. And if you look at this network cloud ecosystem, it becomes apparent that the removal of the network perimeter comes with the necessity of a different holistic approach to cybersecurity, because as you can see from the chart, there's a multitude of new vulnerabilities. And so it's really here to stay, this environment. So I think it's important to understand how it works and what needs to be done differently. So zero trust, with its point of defense principles, has become the only viable approach to be applied across this network ecosystem. And if you look at the chart, you can see there's no one single zero trust solution, because its principles are context and dependent across the whole chart. For example, in an operational technology situation down in the bottom right-hand corner, you might have a trusted path between a system and an IoT device. It might be that you've got an SD-WAN area in the middle here, and you've got to make sure that there is authentication and validation of users trying to access remote services. And so each point in this network in here is an opportunity to implement zero trust principles. And as you go forward, you can see that it becomes critical. And yeah, you must curate the hardware and software network assets to defend them from phishing and ransom as a service attacks. But there are other critical points in this. One is to ensure that the cybersecurity is applied holistically across the whole organization, not just IT. And it's understood as an imperative by the executive team. And I think the larger companies have got that. But finally, and the most challenging, because of this chart here, is to understand how you must delegate, not abdicate, security to all of these outsourced suppliers and open source software, web contractors, systems integrators and providers, and verify their offerings. So kind of gone on longer than I would have liked, but I think that kind of paints the picture of where we're at with this evolution to the network cloud.
Right. Sounds
So
good.
when I listen to, Steve. So when I listen to Mark talk about just how we think about zero trust in the network cloud space, I can't help but think that it's so fundamentally different than how we used to think about the perimeter, and that's been a big part of old thinking, right? Old network thinking certainly was for me. So what does that do to these managed services? It's not, you just can't do it. Just thinking about nailing up pathways, right? Like it's got to include the security component all the way, right?
100%, right? I mean, and when I think about it and I look back at how networks were built before and how security was done, it feels like either we're just distributing the reverse proxy or the proxy out into the network, or we're putting it in the cloud. So the true zero trust model, that will take a long time to come, because all applications have to be re-architected to support it, right? But there are real practical problems that are being solved today by many enterprises that include sort of the canonical zero trust architecture on top of the network, as well as combining with software defined perimeter approaches and network approaches to basically build the security perimeter more flexibly in the enterprise. So I don't know, Darren, if you want to comment on that. You've been doing for front and center in a lot of that, right? Yep.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this goes to the notion of a security overlay, like because of that, distribution of where users and where applications can live, to the point that Mark made. You have to be able to take a set of principles, apply them in an overlay fashion, and it might be different depending upon where in that mesh that you have the app or you have the user, but you need to be able to apply those principles consistently, or have something apply the principles for the endpoint, right? There are devices out there that are legacy devices in manufacturing that cannot assert a notion of trust, so something else out of band of that device has to make a statement of trust for it and supply that into the control point, whether that's a proxy or some other component. So really getting that overlay and building maybe multiple overlays depending upon what use case you're trying to solve is a critical component. And that becomes a service, right? Whether you buy that out of the cloud or you build that yourself, you're building an overlay service with security. And when I say overlay, I mean both the transport overlay for the virtualized enterprise, or the overlay of a WAN environment that's not hierarchical anymore. It's built out as a mesh function between all of the clouds potentially.
Yeah, can I add to that, actually, because it kind of just occurred to me, really, is a lot of these underlying security issues were there before. It's just that because the perimeter is gone, everyone's got to really pay attention to it. So, whether we all had phishing attacks, they've been around for a long time and so on. But now, because this ecosystem has attracted so much cyber attacks, we've now really got to concentrate and focus on the security across the board where perhaps we didn't have to before because it simply wasn't being attacked like it is today.
Yeah, if I
Yeah,
may just add, right, with the managed services in play here, and I think back to our topic here, I mean, when you have, endpoints managed by a different group, network is managed by a different group, and cloud resources are managed by a different group, how do you build end-to-end sort of a security architecture that is managed by either a single group or multiple groups, but the visibility is provided to the responsible party at all times? They should have visibility into everything that's happening across the board. I think that would also become a key piece in having a managed service around end-to-end security or around end-to-end networks as well.
yeah. I think what you just called out there, Zahir, was a really good, callback to what Mark said, where you have to delegate the principles and the implementation of the principles to the larger system. It's not just InfoSec that has, a firewall or an IPS anymore. You really have to delegate out into, the different business units or the different, constituent IT teams in order for them to apply the principles appropriately, because there's no way that one centralized team can have, full operational responsibility of this. But when you do that, one of the key components, and it's one of the things that we've worked a lot on, both within Cisco, but also with other parts of the ecosystem, because IT security is always an ecosystem. It's never one vertical stack. Is being able to share information for that visibility and for the continuous monitoring and for an active response if necessary. So I think that's a very big component for enterprise architects to think about, is what and how are they going to be doing the information sharing, not only between layers of app and network, but also between, endpoint and application security.
Yeah. So Darren, I absolutely agree with you about pushing pushing those responsibilities like closer to the development community, making sure that the zero trust principles are living where they need to be. But you also made the point that operationally we still need to create ubiquity in how we're consuming and operationalizing these environments, right? You still have a SecOps team, NetOps team, and so if you're doing all this in a multi-cloud space, we still, as an industry, lack the ubiquity across our internal clouds, our external clouds, multi-cloud, right? So it still strikes me, and William, I'm kind of interested. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. Kind of interested in your take on that as well. What are you seeing in terms of the enterprise, trying to smooth out those differences? The threat vectors, even the threat vectors are, a little different, between the different cloud providers, right?
Yeah. So to kind of add on the rest of this answer, I want to go back. I've heard the perimeter, no perimeter mentioned a few times, and I have yet to see a real customer network that actually they're increasing perimeters. So in the well-architected framework of each cloud, they have a section for a cloud DMZ or a perimeter. Now the perimeter is different than what we designed in the data center. It's a lot different, but it's still a perimeter, and it's more of a defense in depth approach where you have your web app firewall for your higher layers of the OSI model. You have your network firewall. It's complemented by identity and access management, and you have this whole mesh of security stack all the way up. And each one of those is not managed by a single team usually, from what I see. So the network rules, like the NACLs, all those things might be managed by real network practitioners and security practitioners, whereas identity and access management, living in policy as code, this is generally like some full stack, like cloud engineer-ish type role. So I think the perimeter's definitely shifted, and I would actually like to open up a question to everybody. What are you seeing here? To me, I'm seeing more perimeters and more perimeter-like behavior, and that is causing complexity with cloud ops more broadly, because who supports what perimeter? And if you have like 5 different perimeters, are they different? What is your, take internet ingress and egress. Okay, how many ways does a large company have of doing internet ingress and egress across their data centers, all their clouds and services? And the answer that I've seen is a lot.
Yeah, so I can tell you that I've seen a lot of I wouldn't say a ton, but I've seen plenty of distributed perimeter architectures out there. We had one government customer that basically absolutely didn't want you to be admitted to the network, didn't even want you to get a route into the network if you weren't authenticated, right? So that's something that's got to be done sort of in a distributed way in the network plane, rather than sort of in that more cloud or Fort Knox approach, right, that you might see in a SASE or a data center based approach in the cloud, right, where you can get to the front door and you can knock on it, and you're probably not going to get in that way, but if you can find your way underneath the door, you might get in or something like that. This customer didn't even want you to be able to get on the road to get to Fort Knox. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
so that is one extreme, right? But we see a lot of things in between. That's why Darren and I have talked many times about this, right? We talk about a security overlay, and it truly is an overlay, right? You want security policy and the ability to create security policy to be centralized. You want that somebody be able to operate the security overlay network, in some degrees orthogonally to the actual network connectivity, right? And then you want to be able to drop assertions in the net wherever you need them to be. So if you need the assertions in the network and you need them to be, at as far out to the perimeter as possible, I should be able to do that, right? If you want it to be centralized, you should be able to do that, right? So what we think about is sort of the network plane being the enforcer in many cases, in many cases, and then be able to also have this centralized plane that allows you to turn do a security policy that you can manage for the whole network, right?
Yeah. Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have a slightly different perspective, because when you look at this network picture that we've been looking at from an operational point of view, a lot of what you're saying is absolutely right. You can create trusted paths. There are more perimeters. But however, if you look at this holistically from an organizational point of view, you look at, who is managing the website, what open source software is being used by a vendor that you're buying, or, how are you communicating with your manufacturing, your distributed workforce? And there are so many different avenues in which the network and the users and the providers can be addressed. It goes to many other security things like, trusted employees. It could be many other aspects as well in the supply chain. And so I think when you start to look at, well, who's managing the website? Are they using WordPress with 50,000 plugins? It gets to be outside of the operational network. It's the suppliers to that operational network which create these weak links. And as we all know, you're only as safe as the vulnerability of your weakest link. So it's more taking a holistic point of view. But I get what you're saying, William, about the multiple perimeters in an operational network.
Well,
yeah,
so Mark,
the hard part there is the cloud. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, William. Go ahead, William.
I was just going to say that, I think a lot of customers are actually building these perimeters, and they're doing it, because it's in a lot of well-architected frameworks for cloud providers. Like, this is what is bleeding edge, and when they look at the standard of the way that we need to build this cloud out, they signed some really big, long-term commit with a big cloud provider, an EDP, and they're going in with a strategic view of, okay, we have to spend this much in the next 5 years. We've got to really bake in as much good policy, as many good practices as we can from the beginning on. We need a secure bedrock to build everything on. In there is the documentation to build these pseudo perimeters everywhere. So if the place that everybody's going to take their applications and services is telling you to do something, well, the enterprises are going to do it. And I think a lot of that for large measures for good reason, because where are these applications coming from? They have to get to the cloud. And not everything that you have in your data center is going to be ready for cloud native, and you have to have some return on investment, like short-term gains, along with the long-term plan and vision. So it's a complicated problem for sure.
And I do want to go ahead, sir.
So one one thing that what I'm seeing with large customers in particular is that their security team is actually driving the packet flow the way they actually want it to flow. What that really means is that whatever, let's say, forget about cloud or anything, let's say on-prem, they dictate, okay, this is the way, if you're going to internet, this is the path you have to take. Of course, you have redundancy and everything else. But even in the cloud environment as well, that policy is kind of get not dictated, but actually got required as part of the policy. That, hey, if you're doing this, you have to go through this particular security posture analysis or this security architecture. That way, they are able to actually influence or keep the the requirements in place and the policies in place for security. So that is, it's probably saving the overall security architecture, be it overlay or be it distributed. That they're able to actually force the traffic flow to go through their security architecture.
Yeah. So one thing that when I'm listening to all these discussions, how does it play back, in terms of what we've talked about in the playbook? So if we're looking at that slide that we were looking at a minute ago, it sort of showed the whole ecosystem, right? It's really hard to build a single stovepipe system to do all that, right? And that's what many vendors still try to do. And what we're advocating with the playbook is, look, you need pluggability, right? You need to be able to plug in services to help you, achieve these different use cases, right? So, for example, the B2B one is a perfect one, Mark Fishburne, that one you had in there, because there's so many. Like I see this with the banks all the time. They have so many partners that they need to interact with. It's very tedious for them to establish trust with their partners, right?
Yeah.
Never mind confidentiality. That's easy. Trust is harder, right? We need to be able to have pluggability with IDPs and other security assets to allow them to basically get that trust established, so that they know when a connection is being made, that connection is being made to a trusted partner, whether it be certificate based or otherwise. We need to have that kind of pluggability in our systems, in our orchestration systems, in the way the networks talk to other parts of the orchestration, to other parts of the environment as well. And that's what the playbook is trying to get it to move us towards, is that idea that we have API pluggability between these different services, so that you can build things out like you build out an application. Nobody builds an application with mapping software and builds their own mapping system. They just use Google APIs to basically integrate that. That's the kind of thing you want here, right? So that's what we're trying to do with the playbook.
So, Steve, as a joke, whatever complex requirements you have, myself and William can do it. I'm in professional services. He does automation. We can solve all of your problems.
Yes, that's right.
Always.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the things that I was hearing when William and Mark were talking, that goes back to what you were talking about, is that it's not just technology, right? This is business process engineering as well, as you change these different paradigms. And it's something that was observed to me by a customer, is that he was like, I can pick the right technology, but if I don't put the right structure around it during a cloud migration, or as I'm onboarding partners through traditional B2B functions, if I don't have that plugin, like what the standard interface is between systems, I won't have success. So I think that's a great call out about the playbook, is that it gives you, at least from the technology perspective, what the pluggability should be at these different parts of the mesh, as I've been calling it. But you really have to draw it back to, like, what is it doing for the business, and how is the business going to respond to it for onboarding, or for de-onboarding, or divestment, or whatever the business use case might be.
Yeah, and Darren, on the same point, in the playbook, we have called out that if you're shifting your, let's say, security as an example, from on-prem to cloud, what is the parity that you're looking for, right? When would you be ready to shift, all or certain traffic to cloud security solutions from on-prem? So that you will also find that in our in the playbook, that we guide you through this finding that parity where you can actually be comfortable to shift.
Yeah, part of that integration though is having that same set. So picking like best of breed. If an enterprise uses, security vendor A, they want to use security vendor A. If they're big enough, they're going to have data centers forever probably, because it's just not cost effective to move maybe some applications to the cloud. They're probably going to have data centers and a combination of multi-clouds, especially these really gigantic businesses that are, gobbling up other businesses like Thanksgiving, And so as they go and do that, they don't have the ability to manage 100 different security tools. They want to consolidate that. And I'm seeing a huge move to consolidate all this tooling sprawl and minimize it as much as possible. So what enterprises are doing is they're saying, okay, they have a bake-off over like 5 or 6 different security tools. And they say, hey, this one meets the most requirements across all these areas. This is the one we're going to go with, and we can operate it. And so that gives them the same feature parity across clouds and, back to through to the data centers.
So it's interesting because I kind of feel like where we are on the security side, especially as it moves to cloud, is kind of like we were networking, a little while ago. You take networking, you put a V in front of it. So it's not networking, it's V networking, right? And then everything you did in the physical network, you now do in the virtual network. That's like stage one. We're kind of there with security. But with the idea of driving these APIs and pluggability ideas that we're trying to drive architecturally with the playbook is we give people the ability to experiment with on demand. And once they can do that, they will try stuff. They will, try plugging things in different architectures that they hadn't considered before, because the cost of doing it isn't going to be as high, right? And so then things really start to explode, I think, after that. So
and I think particularly in...
Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, as you're going through this, Darren, I was thinking of these multinational organizations with their own, national representation and national organizations, branch offices strewn around the world, and the idea that it's all coming back to one security screen is kind of ridiculous to with a panel of all that. So it's got to be scalable. And I think that's one of the things about the playbook, is that it allows you to migrate as and when you want to do that or need to do that on perhaps a regional basis as well. And so it creates this flexibility. It also introduces autonomy, where people can do things within a framework that doesn't damage the overall, network application structure, and security applies to that as well. So I think those are all great points.
As I listen to you guys talk, it does sound sometimes like it's total chaos. And I love the chaos. I love the chaos monkey. But we think there are some emerging patterns in some of this. Steve, do we want to talk about that? Maybe we could bring up.
So thank goodness we're going to talk. Thank goodness we're going to talk about networks again, Mark. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm good. I'm okay there.
Makes me safe. I was getting kind of shaky there for a second. So.
Yeah, exactly. So give me that other slide. I'll show you. So I think these are three fairly obvious patterns that you'll see in the network. Do you want to bring up that slide?
Okay, so Steve, we feel like there's some patterns emerging.
Absolutely.
That makes me feel a little more comfortable. It doesn't feel like total chaos and people aren't stabbing each other while they're putting security overlays in. So let's run through these and let's assess. Is this real? Is there hope?
Yeah, I think there is some hope for sure. If you take a look at, and this we've been kind of, we put this together, after observing a lot of different, ways customers were connecting cloud and SaaS. There's kind of 3 patterns emerging. There's, I would say, sort of the data center or cloud provider-centric view of the world, right? Where, everything comes to you via IPsec over the internet. Begrudgingly maybe comes to you via SD-WAN, because a lot of customers have SD-WAN, so they ask cloud providers to support it, right? So they've all done that. But the idea is you're just an attachment circuit to the data center or to the regional data center, right? And that's kind of the view of the world. Everything comes to me. So that's one kind of pattern that we see emerging, right? As people migrate to cloud. Then we see the middle pattern, very popular, definitely in a highly popular emerging use case, right? Where essentially all the traffic goes to the security cloud first, right? And then it gets basically, scanned and access control is done, proxying is done there. And then from there it goes to your cloud applications, whether they be private or whether they be SaaS applications. And generally speaking, those connections are, again, either usually probably IXP direct pairing, or they may in fact be in some cases private connections if the SASE provider is invested in bandwidth and cloud operations to make that work for their customers, right? Now the third one, which I think, Mark, unfortunately we're missing the fabric that's connecting all of the stuff in that circle that's around it. But you can imagine there's a mesh fabric there, right? Um, that fabric might be an SD-WAN fabric, for an idea. It's more the viewpoint of, I've got services which are attached to my network, right? So my branches are attached, my services are attached to there, and basically I access those. I access those those services through gateways that are essentially cloud gateways that are built in co-location facilities, with various different network providers, right? And so that's an emerging pattern we see as well. And that gives you sort of the flexibility to send some traffic to a secure services edge. If you want to do cloud security, it allows you to, still own and maintain your own cloud security, but it also gives you sovereignty over your connection, to different clouds and to your own private data center as well. The idea of a kind of an SD-WAN that's unifying a unified fabric that allows you to, connect all these and build the network, the way you want. So now, if you look at that, if I was drawing kind of a a distribution normalization over it, I think the bulk of the market is in the middle, and the tails are on each side, right? There are people doing it, on the left hand side and the right hand side as well, as well. So very more network centric view on the right hand side. That allows you to basically build out sort of that network using sort of best of breed services that we had talked about, and the idea being that that's going to be API driven, right? So you will, instead of building a network, you will point your traffic at a particular service that delivers you a network service, for example, that you want, low latency, maybe a bulk data service, maybe a spot price bandwidth service, right? That allows you to connect to different interesting places in the cloud or SaaS cloud, right? And you can basically build that out, in a more software-oriented, software-defined way, service-oriented way that will allow you to be more agile, but will still allow you to build best of breed without relying on, sort of having to have everything in a single stovepipe kind of architecture, right? So that's the idea on the right-hand side.
Anybody want to take a guess and set a date for the death of the data center centric pattern? Is it right around the corner? Is it really?
I think it's going to happen
emerging.
whenever IPv4 actually goes away. So we'll see. To be determined.
I was going to say there's a lot of very big companies and that want that pattern to persist. So there'll be a lot of marketing muscle to keep it. But like one of the things that I would ask the group, and what I observe there, is those patterns basically reflect kinds of businesses. What I mean by that is there are businesses that can literally just only go to the cloud or to the data center, and that's all they need. They just need a web presence, and that's it, because they're so distributed, and the core value is the web app. And then there's other kinds of customers that cannot just say that the value that I produce or my core capability is in a web data center somewhere. They actually maybe are a manufacturer or something else, and their core value is a location. And so you'll get a different kind of true North Star, if you will, for what pattern fits your enterprise based upon what kind of enterprise you actually are. I was curious for other people's thoughts on that.
I would agree with that. I think that, I don't think any of those patterns is going to completely die away. It'll be truly a distribution, right? And so, so from my perspective, I think that we're going to focus. There's going to be plenty of focus in the middle for sure. And there will be some customers, like Darren said, that are completely consumed with one single cloud access. But I think there's going to be a lot of customers that are on the right hand side that we're building traditional networks, but they don't want to build the use cases anymore. They want the use cases delivered
Right.
to them, right? So it's like, hey, I'll send you
Absolutely.
my traffic. You do what I need you to do with it, and then send it to the cloud. And there'll be multiple of those. And if that's, I think we've got a large vendor ecosystem working on APIs and programmability to make that happen. And you can see a lot of new startups coming up in that area. Cisco's working in that area as well. And that will give the flexibility that we had in the past for customers that want best of breed, but not not have to spend so much time building it.
So, Steve,
Yeah,
if I
I
may
think
give a slightly, not diversion, but maybe a different example of the same diagram. What we are also seeing is that a lot of enterprises are actually, they don't want their trusted applications, which are already encrypted, to actually go through any other cloud in the middle. Because not only it consumes bandwidth, it's already encrypted. They can't add any much value to that application because they can't decrypt or provide any kind of analysis on it. And most of those applications consumes a lot of bandwidth. So why would I send it to a middleman somewhere where it will actually choke the tunnels which I've created with them? Instead, I would do a bypass or a local breakout from the edge of the network. And that's where the policy that who will actually do the breakout, who will detect that which apps needs to be broken out, right, becomes again the point of, okay, who's in charge of the policy here? And that's
Yes.
why having the two teams to actually come and talk to each other becomes actually even more critical.
Agreed. Yeah.
I'm
No.
actually
I think.
seeing a lot of that as well at Alkira. So like you'll have you have your cloud, you have a business unit or something very particular that has compliance requirements that needs to just take a small sliver of this type of traffic off and put that through the next gen firewall. But everything else is cloud native. They don't
Yep.
want everything to go through the firewall. It's just this one sliver. How easy is it to do that?
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Agreed.
I would think that there's going to be the data center edge and multi-cloud for a long time to come. Particularly, I've got a bunch of people I talk with who are attorneys, and you can imagine the paranoia about any client data being exposed. That court cases could be dramatically affected, not to mention tax consultants. So there are a large number of people who will never let their data leave the data center, at least until things are settled down a bit. I believe it will happen over a period of time. I think there are small businesses who've just got their own computers and may migrate to the cloud later. So it's very much dependent on the size of the organization and the nature of their application, I think.
So one of the things that's interesting, Mark, about what you're saying, and William touched on it as well. Here we have patterns, some emergent, some really, frankly, old patterns. Right? They're there. They're going to service the bulk of our workloads and requirements. But I need this one little thing, Steve. I just need this one little. I need you to do something special. You know what I mean? Like, because we're special, right?
Yes, of course.
In the past, we go to a company, won't name names, but like, I need fries with that. Like, I need a little something extra, right?
Yeah.
And some companies were all too willing, right, to give me fries with that. Now I got a network operating system that has a little tweak here and a little tweak there, and you guys call them snowflakes, right? So these
A lot of hidden commands. Yep.
Yes.
No. Undocumented features.
Yes, fries with flavored ketchup, right, or something
right?
like that. Yeah.
There you go. I want the spicy ketchup.
So
Mark
that's
Fishford, I want the spicy ketchup.
That's right. So that's the thing, right? I think that it's interesting because if you look at what has happened with the data center, moved from what we would think of as infinitely mutable infrastructure. I own the software, I own the hardware, I could do anything I wanted with it, right? Now everything's in the cloud and it's pretty much immutable, right? You don't control the hardware, you don't control the kernel, you got limited influence over networking, and yet somehow people are making do, right? The question is, will our network IT folks, our users, our network IT users kind of embrace that view of the world if we provide them with agility, speed of deployment that allows them to build what they need to build quickly to make their bosses happy, and they love that that idea of having to be able to do things on demand, right? So you get very limited influences over networking as compared to what you had before, but you get your business job done faster, right? So that's going to be the tug of war as we move the network to on demand to see how that rolls out, right? But it takes time, and people kind of got to get their feet wet and used to it. That's what I think. We're going to move.
Well, I'll tell you,
move
so
from infinite
my personal
to immutable.
Yeah, my personal experience in this, coming from banking and brokerage is, in certain cases, right, there were just applications that needed to push every amount of bandwidth or maximizing or the reduction of latency for high performant, trading apps or whatever.
Yep.
I mean, certainly those businesses aren't going to settle when they are trying to differentiate at the center,
Yes.
right?
Agreed.
Those things are going to just remain in the data center, I assume, and where they have control. Is that a fair assessment, or do you think I'm missing the point?
Well, I think
I'm just
you're
saying.
right.
All I'm saying is
There's
the snow. I think there are
there's
going to be
always
snowflakes.
Yeah, 100%. But what I'm talking about when I say snowflakes is even within a larger population, the sites are sometimes snowflakes as well. How much standardization can we get in terms of service consumption at each of the branches at a particular site? But you're right. For those specialty companies that need specific services that are really optimizing, I think that I think that that's going to persist, and we'll always have solutions for that, right? We're talking, there's always going to be, nobody's going away from full custom bespoke networks anytime soon for those types of opportunities. But for the bulk of the market that's looking to get to market quickly to, get the IT workload out of the way because the business model is changing so often, I think, that's a place where we can, maybe we can start to look at immutable infrastructure delivering specific services like super low latency access, right? I want to aim my transaction or my trading data at that service, right? And maybe that is, maybe that's the way, that most companies can deal with that.
So is that not an example of the mesh of use cases that were shown in the previous diagram? Like there's going to be this function, and it's a small function that is immutable, and it's a snowflake immutability in the sense that it's so specialized it must be there, but it has to fit into a larger framework, because to Mark's point that he made earlier is it's not as if the threats are going to ignore that, right? Especially something like a trading application. So you have to have the principles and the guidelines to talk about how you do the plugins of these generic use cases or maybe general use cases and the snowflakes in order to really build out a functioning network. At least from my perspective, But I'm a security guy. What do I know about SD-WAN?
There you go. So anyway, good talk.
All right. Yeah, I'm going to wrap us up because we're getting out of time. We actually did want to get to some other stuff, but we're just going to have to do it on another podcast. I think we're going to hit it again here in next week or two and talk a little bit about cloud ops versus net ops. This seems like a good stopping point, right? And gives everybody something to think about for the next episode. So. Great conversation. I love the fact that we are, digging in and creating order out of Mark Fishburn's chaos. Just someone's got to do it. Someone has to do it, and it might as well be us. So I appreciate it. Thanks to Steve. Thanks to Mark, Darren, William, and Zahir. And don't forget, again, ONUG Fall 2022. You go to onug.net and register for that event. It's going to be in Manhattan, October 19th and 20th. It's going to be fantastic. While you're on onug.net, check out the collaboration. These people that you're listening to here are part of the Network Cloud Working Group. I'm not going to make a big deal about it. The working group is the heart and soul of ONUG. It is what it is. If you want to hang out with cool people, come join the collaborative. It's fantastic. Also, hey, quick shout out. I forgot to give shout out to Mark Fishburn. Mark is the author of Hey, Who Left the Back Door Open? A Holistic Approach to Cybersecurity. You can get it at I guess it's all the normal places. I think I got it on Amazon, Mark. So go check him out. He's the heady writer type, and we love him for it. So until then, we will see you guys on the next ONUG podcast. Thanks, everybody.